Hello, this is History with Jimmy. I'm Jimmy Bach, along with my producer and local historian, Chandler Holmes, and this is episode 22. And this episode is a special episode to go along with the items that Chandler has shown you in episode 21, and this is about World War II. And this is about a person from Berwick, Pennsylvania, who was called the farm boy who went to war in World War II. So we're going to be doing two episodes because I'm going to try to include most of this book in this story here. So there'll be episodes 22 and 23 will be the farm boy who went to war. But before we get into that, I'm going to show you pictures of things that used to be around that are no longer here. And these were honor roll boards. And this one is from Coonsville, and it has a lot of local people's names on there that if you come here, you'll be able to see and probably recognize some of the names. And then we have another one, and this one is from Register. Now, there was one up in Shickshinny Valley at one point. It's not there any longer. There was one in Mackinac. I don't know if that one is still there. But these were around, and they recognized people that were serving in World War II. So I'm going to put these down. And this is what we're going to be talking about. The farm boy who went to war, World War II, and it is the story of the Lost Battalion. This is a very interesting story because it talks about a local person being involved in a very intense battle that happened. So I'm going to start out reading just a little bit about this, and this one was an excerpt from Roses and Thorns from November 19th, 1994. And it was during a Veterans Day program at Northwest, and James Comstock is the farm boy. And I'll tell a little bit more about his family as we get into this. He said it's time for long past for comrades in arms from World War II to come forward and tell their stories. You know what? He's right. With 5 years to go until the millennium, the big war is looking like a shoe-in for the title of the climatic event of the 20th century. The men who fought and won it are our last generation of great warriors. Now they are getting on in years. These old soldiers should not be allowed to just fade away. Those of us who have taken for granted our freedom and peace during the last half-century need to be reminded of the price these warriors paid to purchase that for us. So we salute Comstock and others who will be inspired by his example. And this was written by James Shickshinny, editor of the Press Enterprise. So he was on, and in this book it shows pictures. This book will be available at the library at some point downstairs. So you have to go see Cheryl and get this book and read it. It's not significantly long, but there are details here, and I'm trying to put as many details into this story because I think that's very important. He said, James said, I wrote this story of my experiences in World War II for my son, Police Chief James Lee Comstock, in loving memory of my son Dennis Cook Comstock, who passed away in 1986, and for my grandsons Kevin Lee Comstock, Lonnie Lee Stroop, and Logan James Stroop. Hopefully that my ordeal never be duplicated in their lives. So here's a little history on James Comstock. He was born January 23, 1925, son of William and Anna Mary Comstock. I was named after both my grandfather, James Merrick Comstock, and Aaron Martz. My mother was born Anna Mary Martz. I have my grandfather's Comstock first name and my grandfather Martz's first middle name. That explains my name. I had 10 brothers and sisters. There were 7 boys in our family and 4 girls. When this book was written, they were all surviving. It said, at age 8, I began my formal education by attending a one-room schoolhouse. It was called Snyder's School. When I was in 6th grade, I was sent to the college consolidation school, which was known as the Mifflinville School. I went to 8th grade in school, and then I was drafted for service in World War II. When I drafted, I went to Wilkes-Barre for my examination. I passed, and then went on. When I left for service, it was from Nescopec by train. There was a large contingency of fellows leaving with me. I knew a few of the guys. One of them I knew was Michael Sobach. Michael went into the Air Force, was killed in action, and never came back. And then from Nescopec, they went to New Cumberland. Our parents were at the train stop in Nescopec. It was a very intense moment when we had to say goodbye because our parents knew what we were in for. My furlough time was spent after going through training camp and so on, and it was in Allentown. So I said goodbye to my parents, went to Allentown to say goodbye. That was a very bad moment in my life, as I was leaving my family and not knowing if I'd ever see them again. We were loaded on a ship in the afternoon, and as we were going up the gangplank, the Army band played our national anthem. The band then strummed the chord of our song, "We're coming over, we're coming over, and we won't be back until it's over there." As we got done loading, we sailed after dark. It was due to security reasons. When we woke up the next morning, we were well out to sea. We had no idea where we were going, where we were going to end up, where our destination. It was all secret. After 11 days at sea, we arrived in Casablanca, Africa. The sea was rough. I was seasick the whole trip. All I ate was apples and other food that I could keep down. We arrived in Africa in the afternoon of the 11th day. We were unloaded on the ship to the staging area. That evening I got homesick from the smell of animals because I used them on the farm. I cried for 2 days, and then got over it. And I didn't care when I came back. While we were there, I saw a pretty sight. It was an Arab funeral. It was just as the sun was going down and the procession was going over the ridge of a hill. They had a carriage in front. All the people walked behind in bright costumes. It was such a sight to behold. After 2 days in the compound of Casablanca, they loaded us on a train. It was a diesel engine. The cars were box cars. There were 40 and 8 cars. They loaded 40 men or 8 horses. It took 2 days to go to Casablanca to Oran. That is spelled O-R-A-N. And as we were crossing the desert, we were instructed not to eat even an orange from the Arab people because they had so many diseases. About halfway across the desert, an Arab came down from the hills and he had 6 knives. They were all handmade. He came to our box car and was showing us the knives. And we were looking at him. The train started to move. I said to the couple of guys, "Do you want a knife?" And they said yes. The train started moving. We gave the Arab a kick in the mouth over the bank he rolled, so we divided the knives between us and put them in the bags. But in the end, they were stolen back off of us when we went into the war zone. I'm going to move on here and I'm going to talk about a highlight of one of the other battles before we get into the Lost Battalion. And the reason to do that, I want you to understand the history of this gentleman and what he went through along with his fellow soldiers. I'm going to highlight the main battles. One particular is the Battle of Velletri in Italy. It was a dreary, rainy day when we entered the town. And we got to the outskirts of the town. The citizens had been ordered to evacuate the town. As the people were evacuating, they came out carrying some of their belongings with jugs of wine on their head. They would pass and offer us wine. So we took a jug from some people and began drinking it. There were about 6 of us in the group. We passed the wine around to each other. Then it came to me. I had the jug up taking a drink when the Germans started a counterattack. The machine gun bullets were hitting about 2 inches from my butt. I threw the wine jug down and ran for cover in a vineyard. There were ditches in the vineyard, and I laid down in one. The machine gun fire just passed over me. Leaves came down on top of me. The machine gun shot so fast it was like tearing paper. Then things let up a bit, and we managed to get to a house. In the basement, it was Sunday morning. There were civilians, people in the cellar with us. The Germans shelled the house 17 times that morning. They had tanks short ways away. They were equipped with 88 guns. The concussion would knock you from one wall to the other when the shell hit the house. The houses were made of stone and cement, but there wasn't much left of them when they were done. We suffered high casualties in that battle, and after the battle was over, we advanced on, fighting day and night. We had very little time to sleep. We didn't know when we would get a counterattack. We would be on the line for a month at a time with very little rest. Then they would draw us back and give us a couple days off to get more replacements and some good food. When we were off the line, the thing that disturbed me most occurred at chow time. And this is important to listen to this. We had a wire string around the mess hall, and when chow time came, a lot of little children would gather with small buckets in their hands. We would scrape our leftover food in the buckets, and that's what those little small children had to eat. That sure hurt my heart to see this, more than fighting. It is something I will never forget. After the battle, I was asked if I wanted to take a post as sergeant in the company. The past sergeant in the company had been killed. I debated the idea for a couple days before I accepted, conferring with one of my friends. His name was Harold Coons from Reading, Pennsylvania. We had been through some very tough times together and consulted each other on our problems. I told Harold I would like to help out. His answer was, "Do you wish, but I think you are foolish." I said that since I was on the line all the time, I might as well take it, and that's how I got to be Sergeant James A. Comstock. It was a battlefield commission. I was proud of the commission, and the word of my promotion would go back home to my parents. I had a lot of pride. I joined the company and took over responsibilities. I had 12 men underneath me. I instructed them what to do, and they followed my orders. I went out and repaired blown lines with my men. I never would ask them to do anything I wouldn't do myself. And when we fought the battle from Vetri to Rome, it was very difficult. I remember one battle in particular. We were entering a town, a small stone wall around the town with barbed wire over the wall. It was raining in the afternoon. Germans were advancing, giving us heavy artillery fire. They kept shooting us and sucked us into a stone wall. The man that I had by my side was Glenn Mann. He was from Williamsport, Pennsylvania. We were very close friends. He had 2 children and a wife. He and I lay by the wall with steel flying all around us. I said to him, "Glenn, don't get up and try it." But by that time he rose up to go over the wall. Just as he did, an artillery shell burst behind us. Shell fragments filled his raincoat like a sleeve. You could hear the blood filling in his body. I knew he was hit hard and would die. I said a short prayer for him and went on. We carried a small prayer book with us and had prayers before and after battles. And all that saved me was the good Lord. And I never had the courage to go to Glenn's family and explain what happened. I could never talk about it until I decided to write this account. because it is important to tell the whole story as accurately as I recall, and I include one of my painful memories of the death of Left Man. This is what they went through. The only thing that kept me going was the mail that I received. I would get letters, and it would make me feel good. My mother usually wrote, my father wrote, my two other sisters, Dorothy and Betty, would always write. Everyone was sure thinking of me and the hell that I was going through. When we went back from Rome, we went to the beach of Salerno. We regrouped and got ready for invasion of southern France. After organizing, we sailed for southern France. We arrived that night, and the invasion was set for 3 or 4 in the morning. It started right on schedule, but we had no knowledge of where we were. All of a sudden, everything lit up like daylight with flames dropping from the sky. We knew we were on our way. Then the bombers came overhead and bombed. They dropped the paratroopers behind the lines, and everything started to happen. The ships started to shell the beach with rockets and all the big guns. And when the ships turned sideways, the rockets came out all ways. It looked like the ships were burning up. They were shelling and bombing. We were crawling over the side of the ship into the assault boats. And the bombs and the shelling lasted for 2 hours. You could feel the water shake underneath the boat. It was unbelievable. You wouldn't think a living thing could survive just a hammering. And after we got in the boats, there would be circles out in the water. When they were done shelling and bombing, we got the command to assault the beach. The boats were then fired up and went for the beach. I was on the first wave. Some of the other boats got to the beach before we did. Our boat got about 100 to 150, 200 yards from shore when it got stuck on a sandbar. Our co-pilot was shot with a machine gun. As he slumped down in the cockpit, the other co-pilot jumped in to take over. But when he did, he got excited and dropped the ramp. That gave the Germans a direct shot into the boat at us. They hit a couple guys in front of me. They jumped out in front of the boat into deep water with their packs on. Their equipment went right under and they didn't come up. As Germans were shooting at us in the boat, I was holding a bag-lowered torpedo. These torpedoes were about 6 feet long and were used to put barbed wire to blow the wire apart. German shell hit the torpedo. The powder from it came down all over me. I was lucky that I didn't explode. Afterwards, the co-pilot gunned the boat's engine. The boat broke loose from the sandbar. He then took the rest of us ashore. The men were lying on the beach, wounded and dying. I ran up over them, and I jumped in a bridge abutment. There I found I had been hit in the nose by a piece of lead bullet. It had hit the side of the landing barge, because the Germans were shooting right straight into the boat. About a half an hour after, by the bridge, the shelling cooled down a little bit. We advanced because we had to reach our objective as soon as we could. At 11 or 12 at night, we started to hit our objective and the beach secured. We were taking prisoners in large numbers. At one point, we had 40 to 50 prisoners back to the rear all by myself. I marched them to a compound, returned them to my company, and at 3 o'clock I was done. All of our tanks were destroyed in a ball of fire by German tanks on top of the mountain. The battle quieted down. We spent the night catching some sleep in a foxhole, and as soon as daybreak, a soldier shot the German tank in the track with the bazooka, taking the Tiger out. The Fighting 36 advanced. The farm boy from Pennsylvania had experienced more in the past year since leaving Nescapec, PA, than his entire life. At 18, I had seen enough death and devastation to last a lifetime, but more was yet to come. James Comstock, I was one of the last men in the lost battalion. I was communications sergeant. This is an account what happened to me at this ordeal. It was October 23rd, 1944 when we got our orders to attack. The next morning, we started the attack at the bottom of the mountain. And as soon as day broke, we had a lot of support. We started to carry out everything. I had my full field pack, like what Chandler had shown you. Rolls of telephone wire, a carbine rifle and ammunition. I had 6 men under me. I was their boss. We advanced the mountain and strung telephone wires to the front line. As we were right up with the troops, we experienced several attacks going up the mountain, but they were not extremely heavy. We ran into a lot of artillery shells and mortar shells. It took all day to reach the top of the mountain. And as night was falling, we got orders to set in for the night and dig in. And after dark, the Germans began to shell us with artillery. About 8 or 9 o'clock, they hit the telephone line, which disrupted communications between us and headquarters. The only means of communication we now had was a portable radio. We had a complicated situation. We got about a quarter of the way down the mile. I fell in the mud and jammed my gun in a muddy hillside. I did not know if my gun would fire or not. However, we continued down the mountain, and halfway we came to a break in the line. We quickly repaired it. The line was repaired. We were ready to go back up the mountain when we heard footsteps. Instinctively, we lay down by the path and waited. We were probably about 8 feet off of the path. We were able to identify them as German soldiers by looking up towards the sky and seeing the dips in their helmet. We lay still until they passed. They didn't see us. We were so close, we could tell they had machine guns on their backs. They were so close, I could have reached out and tripped them, but I think I was too scared to move, because I knew if the Germans saw us, they would have killed us. As they passed, we got up and went through the woods, back to the top of the mountain. We didn't repair the line. They left us with only one radio, but the batteries weren't too strong. One porter radio was the only communication that we had when I reported back. We were surrounded. We dug in. We made foxholes and covered with brush or whatever we could find. After we were in there for a couple days, we pulled everything on us. We shared and shared alike. Our ammunition was the most important. We used it sparingly, and on the 3rd and 4th day, we were very hungry. I went out and found a couple of mushrooms. I put them in my canteen, like the one that Chandler showed you, and boiled them in water. The only water we had was what was in a stagnant water hole. The Germans were using the same water. And after 3 days, we sent out 50 of our men to patrol to find out if there was any way out of the situation. Unfortunately, only a couple of the soldiers returned. When they went through our regiment to a radio, we asked for batteries, ammunition, and help to get out. They radioed back they were sending help. The message kept up courage, and after 4 or 5 days of waiting, our forces attempted to shoot artillery shells loaded with food into the area where we were entrapped. That didn't work. The 5th day, airplanes were used to drop supplies to us. But when they dropped the supplies, the first load was short. It went to the area where the German troops were. The second time they hit the target, the supplies came. Unfortunately, the parachute got hung up in a tree. I climbed the tree to cut it down to get the supplies because it would be visible to the Germans. This was an unbelievable situation we were in. Trapped, no supplies or little supplies left. And this will be the end of episode 22. I'm hoping that you'll come back and watch episode 23 as I finish the story of the Lost Battalion. This is Jimmy Bach, along with producer, signing off on episode 22.